Hi everyone, I am so excited to present at this summit. My name is Kim Cobbler, and hopefully you saw my background in the Facebook page, so I won't go over it again. Today I want to share some of my experiences and the 10 keys I've used to help build confidence and foster resiliency when times are tough. I'm really hoping you can learn from my experiences so you don't have to go through life with a big portion of it feeling anxious and unfulfilled like I did. There's a butterfly on this slide because I love that a small little caterpillar can create a cocoon to shelter itself from the world and eventually break out of that cocoon as a beautiful butterfly. It's a great analogy for life and our ability to go through a metamorphosis. My website is called Courage to Emerge Triumphant because it takes courage to break out of that cocoon and make the transition to a beautiful butterfly. So triumphant is part of the Courage to Emerge Triumphant, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I want all of us to be triumphant in becoming our best selves. Triumphant is an acronym that came to me while I was sitting in a church and praying for direction. I truly feel it is inspired for two reasons. I feel I was being guided to pay attention to areas that may be weak or missing, and it was actually several years ago when this came to me, and I felt like I was being instructed to focus on the whole as a means to become triumphant. Because if you take each of these individually, there's no magic or aha. There's nothing that you haven't heard before. What makes this unique is the energy we get when we focus on the entire acronym. They're all very tightly integrated. And for this presentation, because it's a short amount of time, I only have time to cover 3 of these. And I'll tell you, it was really hard for me to pick the 3 because they are all so important. So briefly, let's just run through the acronym and all 10. So T is tell yourself the truth. R, respect who you are. I, instill basic health and fitness. U, understand your goals and vision. M, measure yourself accountable. P, picture your perfect image. H, have fun. N, never give up. And T, turn to a higher power. Because we don't have time to cover all 10, I set my intention to focus on what is most important for me to share with the women at the summit. And these are the 3 that came to mind. I thought, wow, that's perfect because it spells rut. And we all get in a rut sometimes and need a way to break out of that. So these are the 3 we're going to go over today. For respect who you are, we'll touch on self-love, keeping promises to yourself, and self-care. For understand your goals and vision, we'll talk about aligning your goals with your values, defining your goals, and eliminating self-doubt. And for T, turn to a higher power, we'll talk about investing in spirituality, recognizing and using our spiritual gifts, and service and giving back. Okay, so let's dig in and talk about the first one, which is respect who you are. And I want to spend a little bit of time here because if you don't respect who you are, nobody else will either. So let's do a quick exercise. Excuse me. Take out a piece of paper, draw a circle, and then just sit for a minute and think about what gives you self-worth. And then on your circle, draw the section of the pie of how much of your self-worth comes from what you achieve. So the degrees you've earned, how many kids you have, where your house is and the neighborhood, how many cars you have, whatever accomplishments that you've attained, how much of your worth is derived from that. And then I want the second piece of pie that you draw to be how much of your self-worth is derived from what you do for others. So how much of you devote to your kids and your family and your husband and the community. And then that final section of the pie is how much of your self-worth is based on just being in existence. And I want to tell you a quick story about me. I grew up thinking that my worth was all about what I achieved and what I did for others. It was absolutely all about pleasing others, other people, and almost to the point that I'm not sure there was a Kim in existence. My mom and dad were divorced, and each family had separate beliefs and values. And as a means of survival, I became very chameleon-like. When I was at one house, I believed and did the things and that were concurrent with that house, and when I was at the other house, I believed and did the things that were expected at that house. And that's probably true for a lot of children that are in split homes. Um, I also took this into my adult life, and so when I got married, I added my husband to the mix. And when I was with him, I conformed to his ideas and beliefs. So when I'm with my mom, I conform to hers, my dad to his, my husband to his. And really my whole goal was just trying to make sure everyone was happy with me. I was very much a big fence sitter, I say, until I was 51 years old. And when I turned 51, two very critical things happened. One was I had a family member who was very upset with the family and sent a very angry and critical email to some of us. And it accused us of being similar to Hitler and all kinds of other things. It was extremely hurtful. And my reaction was not only one of hurt, but confusion. I was confused, and I remember thinking, wow, all this time I had been so careful not to put myself into one category or another, or to imply that I supported one way of thinking over another, and had, been jumping back and forth depending on who I was with and talking to. And so I had been, very careful about expressing, and in fact, I don't know if I really even ever expressed my own political beliefs or views, my religious beliefs, or anything like that. And so I really couldn't fathom how this family member had put me into a certain category and assumed that I believed a certain way. It was really shocking to me. The second thing that happened was a little more traumatic. As I mentioned, when I got married to my husband, my whole world shifted to focusing around him, and I really had invested my whole heart and soul into building my relationship with him and putting him on a pedestal. And he betrayed me and actually told me at one point that what I thought was real was just a fairy tale. And this was just incredibly devastating. And so when these two things happened, and they were actually happened fairly close together, I was just devastated, as you can imagine. And the key thing about it is that I learned something really important from those two things, and that was that people are going to make decisions about you based on what's going on with them. So it was real, I'd heard it many times before that we don't have control over other people's thoughts and feelings, but this was just two, astounding examples of how that was true for me. And as hard as I had tried to kind of be in every camp, I had been put in categories anyway. And this experience really forced me to start to think about who was I? And I really had to take a step back and start thinking about communicating my own beliefs, because if somebody was going to decide them for me, I figured I better start stepping up and making my own decisions about what I believed and what I valued and what was important to me, and to get off that fence and quit playing it safe. And so that's when I really started looking into this and really starting to understand, where does my self-worth come from? And that's when I learned that 100% of our self-worth is just for being. You are loved for being, not for behaving. And if I could share any important thing with you in this conference, that would be one of them. There's a few others, but this one is so incredible and so powerful. If you could just sit with that for a minute and think about, You are 100% loved, and your self-worth and value is a part of you just for being here. I'm spending a little bit of extra time on respect who you are, because once I realized that 100% of my worth is just in my existence, that doesn't have anything to do with my accomplishing my to-do list or what I've done for other people, it was actually a little bit scary for me. I didn't know how to even think about myself and my worth being separate from those things. And so it took me a while to build that up. And the very first thing that helped me to do that was I started keeping promises to myself. I know it's really easy for us to make promises to ourselves. How many times do we go to bed at night thinking, okay, I didn't work out today, but I will tomorrow. And then the end of the day comes and we still haven't worked out. Or, countless other examples of things where we made a promise to ourselves and tried to value ourselves and our own needs, and then in the course of the day we didn't do that. And we've all heard the analogy of the boiling frog. If you put a frog in boiling water, it'll jump out. But if you put a frog in cold water and slowly turn up the heat until it boils, the frog stays in it until it boils to death. And that's a little bit about how I ended up getting in the place I was in by the time I was 51, and something that we really need to think about. The hardest part of all of that was the realization that I had really, more than anything else, betrayed myself and betrayed what my needs were, what my values were, and I needed to restore that. So one more time of looking the other way, or when something was said I didn't agree with, or one more time of giving in and doing something when I really didn't want to, one more time of putting aside what I needed to take care of someone else's, eventually is what left me depleted and exhausted, and frankly disrespected by many. So I kept thinking, if I could just do one more thing, then I would be happy and I would be fulfilled. But it just doesn't work that way. It's the opposite. So here's some do's and don'ts to help engender self-respect that you can try and work on. First of all, do stand up for your convictions. Decide what your convictions are, and then be willing to stand up for them. You don't need to get in debates about whether they're right or wrong. That's really not the point. They're your convictions, and it's okay for you to have your convictions, and you don't have to be getting a debate about them. Second, establish consequences and stick with them. And this is true for you too. Just like how we tell our kids that they can't go out and play if they haven't done their homework, establish consequences for yourself and stick true to yourself and honor yourself enough to keep your commitments to yourself and to keep them to others. And if others aren't doing what you need or expect, then establish consequences for that and stick with them. You don't need to grovel or plead your case or try and convince them. Just stick to them. The third one is live with a sense of goodness. So you decide what your sense of goodness is, and then just be firm in that. Don't fume or carry grudges about things. You decide what your sense of goodness is, and then stay true to that. And then practice delicate detachment. So don't build your self-esteem on what other people's opinions are of you. If somebody's criticizing you or judging you unfairly, whatever it is, just practice delicately stepping away, removing yourself a little bit and detaching from that. And know that you're still okay, and that you're loved, and that 100% of your self-worth is just from being. And then lastly, one really important thing about respecting who you are is investing some time in yourself. So I want you to ask, are you starving in any of these areas? Are you starving emotionally, physically, financially, or spiritually? Because if you're starving, you cannot replenish or fulfill or nurture somebody else in those areas. And that's why it's so important to nurture yourself and to nourish yourself so that you can take care of the others that you naturally want to. And then get a self-care plan. Define what it is for you. I have a blog post out there about my self-care plan. It doesn't have to be that extensive. Just start little. Just define what are some things you can do to really take care of yourself, and then start building on it. And then be consistent day after day after day, so that it doesn't turn into a situation like that boiling frog, and eventually you find out that the frog is boiled and you can't support yourself or anybody else anymore. So the next one is understand your goals and vision. And the first important thing about doing this is defining your values, because your values are a guiding principle that will help you to keep your goals aligned. And you can Google a list of values. Brene Brown has a really good list of values out on that you can Google, and just go through there. And I know it can be really hard. It was really hard for me, actually, to go through and pick your top 2 or 3 values. What if all things aside, if you are doing those 2 things or sticking true to those 2 or 3 things, what would those be? What's most important to you, and what are your values? Once you have those, then you can define your goals, and define your goals so that they align with those values. Setting goals is really hard for me, because I want to set 3 goals in about 10 different areas. And it was Tony Robbins that said once that we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 10. So just stick to 3. Just try really hard and say, if in the next 6 months or the next year, if I could accomplish the top 3 things in life, what would that be? And then define those goals. And then what I would like to have you do after that is really learn to know and understand your why. Why were those 3 goals the most important? So take each goal and write 50 whys. 50 things that are 50 whys that make that a goal for. Why is that a goal for you? Even if you get to 100, that's even better. But if you can at least get to 50, if you're having trouble getting to 50, then stop and ask yourself, is that really a goal that I need to be accomplishing right now? And is it really aligned with my values? And then once you get the whys, you've really connected to why these are important for you, and it'll help you to stay focused and on track with achieving those goals. And then the last thing is, whenever we set goals, we always have that little gremlin on our shoulder that is, influencing us a bit, or introducing self-doubt. And, if you write your goal down, odds are you're going to hear a voice in the back that's saying, oh, you can't achieve that goal, or why do you have that goal? And a lot of that self-doubt can come from a variety of reasons. It can be a fear of success, it can come from a fear of failure. It can come from a belief that you don't deserve to have that goal. There's all kinds of reasons and things that impact that. And so there's 3 really good ways to help eliminate those self-doubts. And first is put your goals on a vision board. So create a vision board with your goals on it. And then second is the whys that I had you create, the 50 whys. You can turn those into positive affirmations. So say, for example, one of your whys was, I will be more confident at work if I achieve this goal. Well, turn that around and put it into a positive affirmation, and say, I am confident at work in all the things that I do. So the why will help give you a clue as to what you need your 50 affirmations to be. And then record those affirmations, and every morning play your affirmations, look yourself in the eye, look in the mirror, and do your mirror work and repeat your affirmations as you're playing them, and really say them to yourself. And then the last thing is EFT tapping. And EFT tapping is a tool that helps eliminate those limiting beliefs. And I have a slide that describes EFT a little bit. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And it's really a technique to help us with going through acupressure points, tapping on acupressure points, and helping us to eliminate the self-doubt and the limiting beliefs that we have. There's been a lot of studies on EFT. It has been proven to reduce anxiety, stress, PTSD, phobias, allergies. So there's a lot of ways we can use EFT, and we're going to try and do an exercise at the end of this to do some tapping. And so right now I just want to go through what the tapping points are so that when we go do the exercise at the end, you'll know where to tap. So the first thing is when you do tapping or EFT, you do a setup statement. And the setup statement, you tap right here on the side of your hand and say the setup statement. So when I say tap on the side of the hand or the karate chop point, that's the spot that I'm talking about. And then after that, we tap on the top of the eyebrow, just to the side at the very tip of your eyebrow. That's the first tapping point. And then the side of the eye, so kind of at the bottom of the eyebrow. And then under the eye, under the nose, the chin, and then the collarbone, if you can see that. And then the next one is right under your arm, maybe 4 inches down from your armpit. And the last one is the top of your head. So as we do the tapping exercise at the end, I will go through and I will verbally say each of those points. And I just wanted to make sure you knew where to tap when we do that. All right. The last item that I wanted to touch on is to turn to a higher power. And I really didn't learn this until I was in the deepest depths of despair. And if you remember, I mentioned to you the trauma, the challenging time that I had been experiencing. And when I was going through that, I really lost all sense of belonging. To make that a little bit worse, growing up, I didn't really know my biological father. So a little bit of background. I had been led to believe that my adoptive father was my biological father until I was about 13. And even though I instinctively knew that that didn't seem quite right or something was wrong, I didn't find out until I was 13. And when I found out I had a different biological father, I really lost all sense of belonging in who I was, because by that time my mom and dad were divorced and I didn't really know which family I fit in. And then to top it all off, it had been kept a secret from everybody, and I was asked to keep that secret. And so as a young 13-year-old does, I became very fearful, and I twisted that into thinking that if my family found out that I wasn't really a blood relative, that they wouldn't love me anymore. So to this day, I really don't like that saying, blood is thicker than water. So anyway, I lived with that fear all through my teenage years. And then I met my husband when I was 16 years old. And suddenly I knew where I belonged. I belonged with him. I belonged to my husband and eventually my 3 children. And for the next 33 years, I fought hard to really be worthy of their love. And that's where I found my sense of belonging. Then at 51, my kids were grown. They were out of the house. And as I mentioned, I experienced that ultimate betrayal from my husband. And so there I was again with no sense of belonging. And at that point in time, I really didn't feel like I had anyone to turn to. And I turned to God. And that's when I found my true sense of belonging. And if there's a second thing that I could really impress upon you in going through this talk, it would be to convince you today that God truly, truly, truly loves you. He knows you and you belong. You're worthy of love and you're worthy of unconditional love. And sorry that chokes me up when I say it, but it's just so important for me to share that with you and to let you know that you are loved. So there's nothing more freeing and comforting to me, like I said, than knowing that every morning when I get up out of bed and knowing that I'm okay. And that no matter what I've done, no matter what happens, I did my very best. I'm still loved and I'm all right. And I want you to know that so are you. And obviously, I would, I want you to feel that, that you are loved. And the one way to do that is to really invest in a relationship with God. So the way I invest in my relationship and building and continuing to build that relationship with God is I do that through prayer. I do that through strict scriptures. I do that through meditation. I love eco-meditation, through nature, through music. There are so many ways you can build your spirituality and your relationship with God. And I also build it by continuing to heal and to work on healing myself. Now, healing doesn't mean that I'm broken. Healing is, I believe, a Latin word for whole. And that's really how I like to think of it, is as I go through the healing process, as I'm really filling in those gaps and working on myself to become whole again. The scriptures tell us in Corinthians to seek our spiritual gifts. And the fact that you're in this summit and listening to these presentations already tells me that you probably recognize some of your spiritual gifts and you instinctively know you were born for more. And we all need to learn to love each other and support each other in developing our spiritual gifts and talents. Maybe you easily feel other people's feelings or have a lot of empathy. That's a spiritual gift. Maybe you already have a close relationship with God and have a tighter link to His words and guidance that you need to be sharing with others. That's a spiritual gift. Sometimes I think we put too many boundaries on our spiritual gifts. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 10, it says, it may be so many kinds of voices in the world, and none of them is without signification. I love that scripture. So tune in and learn what your voice is, and then be willing and courageous enough to share it with the world. So that's what I wanted to say about spiritual gifts. And then lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about service. When I was going through that really hard time, I kept hearing people say the best way to get out of feeling sad is to do things for others. And I just didn't have the capacity to do things for others at that point. I was really, really hurting. And I finally realized that my giving and my service to others at that point of time was receiving and allowing others to do for me. And I think that's a really important thing that we have to remember, is that sometimes our service is receiving. And when we're depleted and we don't have the capacity to serve, then we need to invest a little time in ourselves and our self-care. And then, of course, eventually you'll get to a point where that's not the case, and it's time to give back to others and to do for others. And hopefully that's what I am doing for you today in sharing my learnings and experiences in this message. And now I just want to go to the summarizing what I've gone over. I love memes, and memes are a great way to learn and think about some of the things that we've talked about. So the first one, this one kind of doesn't belong, because we are always going to be judging people. There's no getting out of judging, whether it's good judgments or bad judgments. Life right now is and always is about judging whether something's safe, whether something's dangerous. Everything is a judgment. And so we're not going to get out of judging, but we can build our self-esteem and our self-confidence to know and understand that other people's judgments don't dictate our self-worth and our overall well-being. And I think that's the important message. I like this meme about recovering people pleasers. I think if you read through that, you'll see that those are true. At least they were for me. And then I love this one. A lot of things broke my heart. but fixed my vision. And that's what I truly believe some of my past lives experiences have been, is certainly they have, many of the things have broken my heart, but they've put me on a path and given me guidance and direction to seek out the things that were really more aligned with my purpose. And then this one is about what I mentioned. It's not your responsibility to manage and take care of other people's feelings. Your words, your behavior are your responsibility, and that's all you have control over. I love this one. You survived what you thought would kill you. Now straighten your crown and move forward like the queen you are. And I think that's the one I really want to end on. And now let's transition to moving into doing that tapping exercise. Okay, this is a script Carol